down and I'll start. All right, welcome everyone. I'm glad you can join us for this session, this Let's Talk About It with the Peace and Justice Work Group. We will be talking about gun violence and gun violence prevention with Traci Murphy with the Delaware Coalition Against Gun Violence. All right, Traci, welcome everyone. I'm glad you can join us for this session. Let's talk about it. Professional Peace and Justice Work Group. She's not advocating for solutions to gun violence. She's reading on the beach or playing tennis. Prevention. So we're glad to have Traci with us with the Delaware Coalition Against Gun Violence. She is Traci is a participating audio only at the moment, communications and fundraising, but you will be able to see her slides. And in a little while, gun violence. She will be back reading on the beach or playing computer tennis. And join us. So we're glad to have Traci with us to kick it away, Traci. Discussion. She is
you can just skip to the next
participating
slide,
audio only at the
so
moment.
Much. I'm really so
but you will be able to see her slides, and in a little while she will be back at her computer and join us by video as well.
At Westminster,
take it away, Traci.
With a group of passionate community advocates who thank you so much. I'm really so touched being tired of gun violence with this group in particular, wondering about. I know that the Delaware Coalition Against Gun Violence and what investments our community or state or city make with prevent gun violence, passionate community advocates who but also tired other municipalities being tired of gun violence. And over the past 10 years, our wondering about grown to have solutions hired their first and what investments our community or state or executive director, and that's to prevent gun violence from in our city and group of volunteers in other municipalities pouring their hearts and souls into this group. And over the past 10 years, our coalition has grown, and I think that have hired their first ever investments like executive director, and that's me, and that's a big change from all over the country at the same time that the national conversation pouring their hearts and souls into this group. And you'll know that, and not something that's often been discussed. And I think that gun violence and gun safety solutions were sort of like grassroots groups like this one, and now forming all over the country at the same time that the national conversation. And I think that's really exemplary of, and you'll know that that's something that's often been discussed is that grassroots gun violence and gun safety solutions were sort of the third rail of politics. And I'm proud to say that it's one of the only. This conversation couldn't be more timely as I am driving. And I think that's really exemplary of Dover, where the Delaware House voted to pass a discontinuation of the sale of assault-style mobilizing and organizing and advocacy. A giant indicator. And I'm proud to say that. So I want to thank you all. This conversation couldn't be more timely as I am driving starting from conversation a decade ago. The Delaware House. I'm really honored to kind of pick that up and meet this moment right now. Sale of assault-style weapons. So I know I don't have to tell you a lot about our organization, indicator of our, but I want to just remind thank you all for listening in that we are an organization of gun owners. And I'm really honored to kind of pick that up and meet this moment right now. Clergy, so I know I don't have to tell you a lot about our organization, people who care about this issue, but I want to just remind all over the country, and we are not that we are an organization of gun owners, and I want to make that very clear because I think there's an opportunity to discuss teachers, different kinds of solutions, and there are so many people who care about this issue in Delaware and all over the country. And we are not circulation right now in our country. We will ever fully, and I want to make that very clear because I think there's an opportunity to mitigate it and make it rare and abnormal solutions, and I think we can get there. I personally don't believe, and I'm really over 400 million how we can do that in circulation right now in our country. We will ever fully end gun violence. But we can do a whole lot more. I don't remember what order my slides are in, so I can't speak to the next one as it's getting started. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. So this is, I think it's really important to recognize that gun violence, particularly that and what that process where we are now is a public health crisis. Much like the COVID crisis required, I don't remember what order my slides in, so I can't speak to the next one as it's getting started. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. So this is, and at the very bottom of that pyramid is the simple, particularly at the place where we are now is a public health crisis is not the bolstering. Much like the COVID crisis required public solutions and the structural equity. We need public solutions to prevent gun violence. And so when the very bottom of that pyramid, housing is simple bolstering, recognize simple. Fair housing and housing equity is not the bolstering scarcity and our issues involving education, equity, and parity, and the structural equity of our communities. Supporting gun violence prevention. So when you talked earlier about fair housing, it's just so important to recognize that when we pull fair housing poverty and housing equity, people feel safe and loved, food scarcity and issues involving education, equity, and parity. And then we can talk as we go through to the next gun violence prevention. All of the different ways when we live doing this work here in Delaware right now, when we pull families out of poverty, when people feel safe and loved, specific organizations that do specific able to focus, prevent gun pieces of community violence intervention to the next slide, as well as all of the different ways that are doing this work here in Delaware for this conversation. Working with the Center for Structural Equity, so I think working with, that's something that I think is part of a longer term approach, but it's an immunity part of the conversation as well as elevating policies that are really, really important
to shift us. Hopefully you can still hear me.
So I
run
think
into my computer. Am I still with you?
That's something that I think
Yes,
is
you are.
part of a longer term approach,
So
but
why
it's
don't
an
we
important part of the conversation as well.
And I am now going to shift us. Hopefully you can
and
still
talk a
hear
little
me.
bit about the existing
I'm gonna
policies.
run into my
that are
computer. Am I
preventing
still
gun
with you?
violence in Delaware right
Yes,
now.
you are.
I don't
Okay,
have to
good.
tell you because I know this group is
so why don't
better
we
informed than many
To
that
the next
we
slide.
already have some pretty good gun safety laws.
And talk a
But we
little
are
bit
also
about the
lacking in
existing
certain
gun
policies
safety laws
that are
and
preventing gun violence.
and
in
we
Delaware
can
right
do
now.
a lot to address.
I don't have
gun
to tell you
safety just from
because
the
I know this
policy
group
perspective.
is better informed.
I don't
want to
spend too much
we
time on
already
this part
have
because
some
my sense is that this
pretty
group
good
is pretty
gun safety
engaged.
laws. But we are also lacking in
And
certain
I'm
gun
gonna open
safety
my
laws
Zoom.
and
And so you probably
we
know
can
a lot
do a
about
lot
the
to address
policies
gun
that we
safety
already
just from the
have.
policy perspective.
Instead,
I
I
don't
want
wanna
to talk
spend
about
too
the policies
much
that
time
I'm
on
on
this
that
part,
we really need.
because my sense is
And
that
those
this group is
policies
pretty
in
particular
engaged.
are the
And
some
open my
of the
Zoom.
slate of policies
And so you
that
probably
we
know a
already
lot about the
have.
policies that we already have. Instead, I want to talk about the policies that we
All right, you
already
still
that we
there,
really need.
Tracy?
And those policies in particular are
She joined Zoom and then
some of the slate
Quit her
of
phone.
policies that we
We lost her.
Okay, nope, I'm here.
Oh, good.
I'm just okay. Here we are.
All right, you still there,
Sorry.
Tracy?
Okay, I'm back. So we were talking
She
about
joined Zoom
the
and
existing
then
gun safety laws, which I think you're probably pretty
quit her
familiar
phone,
with. And if
But we
if
lost her.
for some
Okay,
reason
nope,
you're
I'm
not
here.
and you want to
Oh,
go
good.
back to
I'm
address
just
these,
get-
let's do
okay.
that. But I know that
Here
we're
we
tight
are.
on time and I don't want
Sorry.
to, okay, I'm back. Sort of flood you with
So,
information that you
we were
already
talking
have.
about,
So when
the
we go to the
existing gun
next
safety
slide,
laws,
you'll
which
see
I
some
think
of
you're
the
probably
policies
pretty
that
familiar
are being
with. And
discussed right
if
now.
for some reason
just
you're
have,
not and you
couple
want to go
things
back
for you,
to
Tracy,
address
on
these,
this
let's do
slide.
that. But I know
Can you
that we're
say
tight on
what
time
would be
and I
considered
don't
part
want
of what
to
are called the red
sort of
flag
flood you with
laws?
information that you already
Sure.
have.
So if you're looking
when
at
we
this
go to the
slide in
next slide,
particular,
you'll
that
see
would be
some
the
of the
lethal
policies
violence
that are
protection
being
order
discussed right now.
and the Bo
I
Biden
just
health
have
law.
a
Delaware,
couple
I'm going to
things
put in
for
the
you,
chat
Tracy,
for you
on
all
this slide.
sort of a
Can you
little
say
homework
what
assignment
would be
on
considered part of
taking a
what
look at
is
a
are called the
new
red flag
video
laws?
series we have just
Sure. So if you're looking at
launched,
this
which
slide
is
in particular,
about
that would be the
informing
lethal violence
Delawareans
protection
about
order
the lethal violence
and the Bo
protection
Biden
order
health
process.
law.
And I'm going to put in the
Because
chat
I think
for
it's
you
a really
all
wonky policy.
sort of a
and
little
lot of
homework
folks don't
assignment
know
on
taking
that
a
they
look
can
at a
personally
new
request a lethal
video
violence protection
series
order.
we
They
have
might not know when or
just
how
launched,
to
which
do
is
that.
about
And we're trying to
informing
take some of the
Delawareans
mystery
about
out of
the
that
lethal violence
process
protection order
to make it
process.
even easier for families
Because I think it's
to
a really wonky policy.
keep their
and
loved
a lot
ones
of
safe
folks
and
don't
healthy
know
by using
that they can
you know,
personally
essentially
request
civil
a lethal
order.
violence protection order.
And
They might
then the
not
Bo
know
Biden
when
mental
or
health
how
law
to
was
do that.
passed at the same
And
time.
we're trying to
just
take some of the
digging into
mystery out of that
strong
process
implementation
to make it
around that
even
law,
easier
which
for families
enables
to
and protects mental
keep
health
their loved ones
professionals
safe and healthy
who are
by
worried
using
about
that,
the safety
you know,
and
essentially
wellness of one of their
civil order.
clients, and it enables them.
And then the Bo
to
Biden
essentially
mental health law
break
was
that
passed
patient
at the same time, and we're just digging into
confidentiality
some
in
strong
order
implementation
to
around
save their
that
life.
law, which enables
and
So it's a really
protects mental
important
health
policy, and it's one that's
professionals
not
who are
very
worried
well
about the
understood
safety
or
and wellness of
implemented
one of
here.
their clients, and it
And
enables them
finally, the
to essentially
ghost gun,
break that patient
ban, ghost guns is a
confidentiality
newer issue that I'm
in
not sure
order
everyone is
to
familiar with, but
save their
Delaware is
life.
kind of ahead in terms
So it's a
of dealing
really
with that.
important
You wanna
policy,
say
and
a
it's
little bit
one
about
that's
ghost
not
guns?
very well
So earlier this
understood or
legislative
implemented
session,
here.
And finally,
We
the
passed and have
ghost
already
gun,
signed into law a ban on ghost
ghost
guns,
guns is a
which
newer
means that you
issue that I'm
cannot
not sure
buy in
everyone is
Delaware
familiar
or
with, but
have
Delaware is
delivered
kind
to
of
you
ahead
in Delaware
terms
from the
of dealing with
internet.
that. You want to say a little bit about ghost
Kits
guns?
to
sure.
assemble
So earlier
guns at
this
home,
legislative session,
which mean
it's sort of like a
we
craft
passed and have already signed into
hobby-style
law a
kit
ban on
that
ghost
builds a
guns,
real gun,
which means that you
and those
cannot
real
buy
guns
in
cause real
Delaware or
problems
have
delivered
in
to
communities
you
and
in
so
Delaware from the
we
internet.
have banned them here. They
Kits
are
to
notoriously
assemble
used by
guns at
people
home,
who want to,
which mean it's sort of like
bypass
a
background
craft
check system.
hobby style
They're
kit that builds a
specifically
real gun,
appealing to those who
and those
recognize
real
that
guns
they are a
cause
person
real
prohibited
problems,
in
and
communities,
that they
and
should
so not have
we have
access to that
banned them
kind
here.
of weapon.
They are
And
notoriously
Delaware
used
took the
by
big step
people
of
who
banning
want to
ghost guns earlier this
bypass
session.
a
We
background check
also
system.
earlier this session
They're
did some work on disarming
specifically
domestic
appealing
abusers,
to
which
those who
means
recognize that they
we
are a
have closed a
person
loophole
prohibited,
in Delaware code,
and that they should
it used to
not
be that
have access to that
when
kind of
someone
weapon.
filed a protection
And
from
Delaware
abuse
took
order,
the big step of banning
72
ghost
hours
guns
might
earlier
pass
this session.
before the
We
firearm
also earlier
relinquishment
this session
process
did some work on
was
disarming domestic
incorporated
abusers,
into
which
that
means that
into
we
that
have closed
order,
a loophole
and
in
now
Delaware
that and that's
code.
during the
It
ex parte
used to
session.
be
They have
that,
eliminated ex
when
parte.
someone
so now,
filed a protection
as soon
from
as a
abuse
protection
order,
from abuse order is
72
filed,
hours might
relinquishment is
pass
required.
before the firearm relinquishment
Very good. And just
process
for ghost
was
guns, they have no
incorporated
serial
into
number
that
and are untraceable.
into that order.
That's true.
And now
What-
that
what
and that's
for
during
is
the
a lot
ex
of metal
parte session. They have
detectors may not
eliminated
pick them
ex
up 'cause
parte.
some
So
of them are
now,
non-metallic.
As soon as a protection
that's true.
from
They can
abuse
be
order is
3D
filed,
printed.
relinquishment is required. And so, for a number
Very
of
good.
reasons,
And
we
just
want to
for
make
ghost
sure that
guns,
we're
they
certainly
have
not
no serial
bypassing
number and
background
are
checks.
untraceable.
That's true.
What
So-
And so
for
that's
is a
why
lot of
that's
metal
such an
detectors
important
may not
policy
pick
as
them up
well.
'cause some of them are non-metallic.
And then we can
That's true.
skip
They
to
can
the
be
next
3D
slide,
printed.
and then
This is
um,
the current.
and so, for a number of
slate
reasons,
of
we want
bills
to
that the
make sure
governor
that we're certainly not
and Senate and
bypassing
House
background
leadership
checks.
committed to putting through the Delaware.
And so that's why that process such an
this
important policy
month.
as well.
They announced this at the end of the
And then we
day
can
on
skip to the
Thursday
next
of last
slide, and then
week. This is the
And
current.
I'm proud to say that a week
slate
later,
of bills that the
three
governor
of these bills have
and Senate and
passed
House
through
leadership committed to.
the first three
putting
bills on this
through the
list have
Delaware
passed through the
process
House
this
committee
month.
One
They
of those
announced this
bills
at the end of the day on
was
Thursday
voted on by
of
the
last
House
week.
today, and it passed the House.
And I'm proud to say
Senate
that
Bill
a week
6
later
has come back to the House.
Three of these bills
after
have
the
passed
Senate
through
stripped some negative amendments
the first
from it,
three bills on this
and the
list
ban
have passed
on
through the House
the
committee.
immunity repeal bill
One
was
of those
filed
bills,
today,
HB 450,
and we
was
expect it to go
voted
to
on by
Senate
the
committee
House
next
today, and
week.
it passed the House.
I have yet to check
Senate
in the
Bill
last 2
6
hours
has
on
come
the
back to
handgun
the
converter
House
switch bill, but
after the
I
Senate
expect
stripped
that
some
will,
negative amendments
be
from
filed.
it. And the
Imminently,
ban
if it
on
has not been
the
filed so
the
far,
immunity
and
repeal bill was
will
filed
also
today,
go to a Senate committee
and we
next
expect
week.
it to go to Senate
So
committee
there is
next
a
week.
lot
I have
happening in
yet
the
to
Delaware
check in the
legislature
last
right
2
now.
hours on the
Governor
handgun
Carney and the
converter switch
leadership
bill,
of the
but
chambers have
I
sort of
expect that
risen to
that
the
will
challenge of meeting
be
this
filed
moment.
imminently if it has not been filed
And
so
we are
far,
very
and
fortunate to have
we'll
and
also
so
go to a
much
Senate
energy and
committee
time
next
building
week.
our capacity
So
over the
there
last
is
couple
a
of years that
lot
we're really
happening in
able
the
to
Delaware legislature right
participate
now.
and engage
Governor
on
Carney
every
and the
level.
leadership of the
Right
chambers
now,
have
from
sort of
engaging with voters
meeting
to
this moment,
do patch through
um,
calls to their legislators,
and we
mobilizing
are
on
very fortunate
petitions and sending emails into
so much energy
legislators,
and
et
time
cetera.
building our capacity over the
And what
last
about
couple of
SB
years that
3?
we're really able to
SB
participate and engage
has
on every
been,
level. Right now,
apparently,
from
we are
engaging
short
with
8
voters
votes on to
SB
do
3.
patch through calls to their legislators,
I
mobilizing
think that it's
on
probably
petitions
close to
and sending
6,
emails
but
into
you know,
legislators,
you
et
need
cetera.
more than you think you need, and
what
sometimes you
about
lose more
SB
than you think
3?
you have.
SB 3,
Senate Bill 3, everyone
been,
understands. I shouldn't say Senate Bill 3.
apparently
We are
permit
short
to purchase
8 votes on SB 3.
requiring a permit to purchase a handgun in Delaware.
I think that
is a
it's
policy
probably
that
close to
we
a
think
6,
is
but,
incredibly
you
important. You need more than you think you need,
And we
sometimes you
believe
lose more
that
than you some
think you have.
aspects of that policy will
Senate Bill
emerge in a
3,
bill that will
everyone
be filed in
understands.
January. I shouldn't say Senate Bill 3.
However,
Permit,
excuse me, there are
some requiring a permit to
parts of
purchase a
that bill that
handgun in
just
Delaware
can't,
is a
that we
policy
just
that
can't
we
get the
think is
support for
incredibly important
with the existing
and we believe that
members
some
of the
aspects
House.
of that policy will emerge
And so we have two
opportunities.
We either refile a
However,
different bill
Excuse me, there are
after the
some
election, or
parts of that bill
we-
that just
and
can't,
then
that we just
and
can't
we
get
use the same
support for
legislators, or
with
we
the
change the legislators
existing
and file the same bill.
members of the House.
Either way, changes need to be made.
And so we have two opportunities.
And so
We
we're
either
going to
refile
refile
up
a
in
different
January
bill
where we have been
after the
assured,
election,
or
by legislators and then
leadership that they are willing to
we
take
use the
that
same
back on as a
legislators, or we
January
change the
priority.
legislators and file
And
the
so
same
we
bill.
are deciding to
Either
not
way,
throw the baby
changes
out with
need
the
to be made.
bathwater and recognizing that.
And so we're going to pick
that-
that back up in
That
January,
the
where we
6
have been
bills that
assured
the
leadership
by-
is committing
by
to right now
legislators
is more than
and
we
leadership
thought
that they are willing
we
to
would do
take that
in
back
3
on as a
sessions.
January
Never mind
priority.
one.
And
And
so we
certainly
are
not in 1
deciding to
month
not throw the
in
baby
an
out with the
election year.
bathwater and recognizing
So
that
we are taking it
that
for what it is,
that
which
the
is a
6
huge show
bills
of
that
support.
the leadership is committing to right now is more than we
So why don't
thought
we jump?
we would
I
do
think
in
these are
3
always
sessions.
statistics I really
Never
like
mind
to share
one.
because I think it's really
And
important.
certainly not in 1 month,
particularly
in an
about
election
22%
of parents who
So
believe
we
that their
are
children had
taking it,
never handled the guns
for what
in
it
their
is,
home,
which is a huge
were
show of
contradicted by the children themselves. And that was a study done at Johns Hopkins in
support. So why don't we
pediatrics.
jump? I think
where,
these are always
children said,
statistics
"Oh, yeah,
I
I
really
know where
like to
your gun
share
is,
because
Mom.
I think it's
I know
really
exactly where
important.
it is. You told me not to touch it, then
Particularly
I
about
shouldn't know
22%
about it, but I
of
know where you
parents
keep
who
it.
believe that their
I
children
can
had
find it
never
anytime.
handled the guns in their home.
So it's really
were
important that we
contradicted by
recognize
the
that
children themselves.
and that was
Children
a study
always
done
know
at
more
Johns
than we think
Hopkins
we
in
know.
pediatrics.
They know,
where,
and that
children
even
said,
when
"Oh, yeah, I know
properly
where your gun
stored,
is, Mom.
having
I
a
know
gun in the
exactly where
home
it is.
doubles
You told
your
me not
risk
to touch
of
it, then
becoming a
I
victim of
shouldn't know about it,
homicide
but I know
and
where you
triples
keep
the
it.
risk of suicide.
I can find it anytime.
Put it more plainly.
So it's
you
really
cannot
important that we
drown in a
recognize that
backyard pool if there is no
children
pool to
always
drown
know
in.
more than we think we
So
know.
let's recognize
know,
that
and
guns
that
even
are
when
inherently
properly
deadly
stored,
weapons.
having
And
a
they
gun
need
in
to
the home
always be
doubles your
treated as
risk of
such
becoming a
with-
victim of
with
homicide and
strict
triples the risk
discipline
of
by gun
suicide.
owners. And
Put it
by
more plainly,
broader
you cannot
awareness,
drown in a backyard
from
pool if there is no
community
pool
members,
to drown in.
neighbors, friends,
So
constituents.
let's recognize
etc.
that
guns are
So
inherently
I want to jump
deadly
to the
weapons,
next slide, and then
and they
really
need to
that's sort of the
always
end of
be
the
treated as
presentation.
such. With
The good news is
with
we know
strict
what it will
discipline by
take
gun owners
to make Delaware
and by
a safer state.
broader
The
awareness.
pathway to our success has
from
been already
community
charted by
members,
states
neighbors,
like New
friends,
Jersey,
constituents, etc.
Connecticut,
New York.
So I want to
that
jump to the
have
next slide, and
much
then really that's sort of the
broader
end of the presentation.
laws,
The good news
much
is we know
stronger
what it will
funding
take
for
to make
community
Delaware a safer
interventions,
state. And
the pathway to our
and
success
better
has been
investments
already
on
charted
public
by
awareness
states
and
like
public
New Jersey,
education.
Connecticut,
And so
New York,
while
that have much
standing in the
broader
chamber of the House
laws,
and cheering them
much
on as they
stronger
pass
a
funding
ban
for
on the sale of
community
assault-style weapons
interventions
is very exciting.
and the
Better
biggest work
investments
is
on
really
public awareness and
engaging
public
with
education.
folks
And in the community,
one-on-one
and in small
standing
group
in the
presentations
chamber of the
like this
House
one
and
to really
and
let people
cheering
know
them on
about
as they pass
how we can do
a
better
ban on the sale
with
of
gun violence
assault-style
prevention in
weapons is
Delaware.
very exciting. The
So
biggest
thank
work
you.
is really
I'm eager
engaging
to
with ask
to
folks
answer
in
your
the questions
community
and hear more about your
one-on-one
thoughts
and in small group
and see if I can give
presentations
you a
like
little
this
more
one to
information
really
on
let
these
people know
policies.
about
How
in
we
the
can
next
do
15
better
or so minutes
with
gun violence
before-
prevention in
I know we're
Delaware.
going to start to lose people who are interested in
And
watching
so
the
thank
January
you.
6th hearing.
I'm eager to
ask to answer your questions and
And
hear
offer
more
an
about your
insight.
thoughts
I've been
and
working
see
on
if I
the
can give you a
gun
little more
laws for a
information
long
on these
time on the federal
policies
level.
in the
And-
next 15 or so minutes before I know we're
was
going to
looking
start to
for
lose people who are
information
interested
on
in
some of
watching the
best
January 6th
absolute
hearing.
practices of laws and enthusiast organizations across the world
for a long time.
and
on
I
the
found
federal
Switzerland to be
Okay.
the
top-rated one.
and
was looking
it's
for
really
information
interesting to
on
go
some
to
of the
their
best
information
absolute
sites
practices
to read about
what their gun
laws
culture is like.
and
in Switzerland, almost everyone
organizations across the world. And I found
they
Switzerland
have the
to
lowest,
be the
lowest
top-rated
rates
one.
of
It's
of-
really
of
interesting to go to
homicide
their
and
information sites
do you
to
think
read
that's
about
attributed
what
to?
their gun culture is like.
Well,
And-
if you go there and
in
you see what
Switzerland,
kind
almost
of
everyone
gun
is a
laws
gun
and practices
enthusiast.
and things like that they have.
And they have the lowest. It seems
lowest
like
rates
there's been a
of,
longstanding culture
of-
there
of
where everyone
homicide
was trained
and suicide.
as military.
What do you
as
think that's
military.
attributed to?
Women and
Well,
men
if you
alike.
go there and you
And
see
so
what
they
kind
all
of
were trained
gun
in
laws
guns
and practices and things like that they
and,
have.
they all it seems
had
like
such
there's
exposure
been
to
a
guns that
longstanding
the
culture
novelty of
there
having
where
a gun
everyone was
wore trained as
And so the
military, as military.
enthusiasm
women and men alike. And so they all were trained in guns on a broad basis across the country. And so had such exposure to gun laws that were novelty of having a gun and spanning from the World War I and sport. Those years came through on a broad basis across the country. Gun laws. And so so much gun laws that they have gun festivals several times a year where vast spanning from the World War I and II. And those years they of modifications to their civic laws and rules and things like that. They have so much so for us they're that they have gun festivals several times a year where these people make a life and they have feasts and festivals at their shoots. You know, it's like a community. It's like an October fest several times a year. Things like that they have. And so for us, they're extreme. I really encourage people who want to get some really brilliant ideas. People make a life. Check on. They have feasts and festivals at their shoots. Because these people know what's going on. Community. It's like an gun enthusiast several times pleasing the gun and so. But also make really encourage people who want to get some really brilliant ideas.
That's so
to
interesting.
Check on,
you know, we so often hear in this work
Sweden
about how
and Finland,
most other countries
know
have
what's going on when it
most
comes
other
to gun
developed countries, right,
enthusiasts,
have such a
pleasing the
drastically
gun
lower
enthusiasts,
level of gun
but also
ownership
making a safe
than we
society.
do here in the United States.
That's
and I
so
think that's really interesting.
You know, we
that
so often
I
hear in
had
this work
heard a lot
how
about Switzerland and high
most
rates of
other
gun ownership.
countries have
Although doing a quick Google
most other
search tells me that
countries, right,
the
have
NRA
such a
likes to say,
drastically
see,
lower
guns
level
don't cause
of gun
problems in
ownership
communities because they
than we
have them
do
in here in the
Switzerland.
United
So,
States.
I
I think that's really a
interesting that
cultural difference. I hadn't heard a lot about Switzerland and high rates of gun ownership. Although doing a quick Google search tells me that the NRA likes to say, see, guns don't cause problems in communities because they have them in
seriously
Switzerland.
distorted.
So, I think that's really a cultural difference.
That's a whole new
that's
world.
and
That's a
way
play that they're
for our society.
an American politician targeting on the truth, and competitions and things like that. My father was it's seriously distorted. Switzerland Olympic and grievously distorted. But there's a whole new world. He trained me way, and so for our society, I've always been very good targeting and competitions and things like that. My father was gun and trained by a Switzerland Olympic. And my dad is superb. Or was when he's passed on now, and he trained me. Look at Switzerland and Finland. I've always been very good. These are all the countries that had to defend themselves without any good shooter. Really means against the Nazis. And my dad against Germany. Superb. Okay.
It sounds like an example of a truly well-regulated militia.
Look at Switzerland and Finland, it is, and compare, because these are all the countries that had to defend themselves without any really they had a little means help against the Nazis, against Germany. They were on their own.
It sounds like an example of a truly that's really interesting. And I think, certainly we have come a long way in the United States in gun ownership and also the technology of firearms. I think has come a very long way since then. And I wonder if gun ownership in Switzerland, I think that's really interesting. And I think, but I also, and I don't know, and I'm going to look into it in the United States. It's ownership and also the technology of firearms has come a very long way.
I think you'll find,
and I wonder if gun ownership in Switzerland is high for certain kinds of guns, but I also, and I don't know, and I'm going to look into it more. If certain kinds like that, of weapons are not sold there.
The expanding clips. Well, I think you'll find, I think you'll find that I think these people are more marksmanships. That may very well be. And they are nuts on the shooting a lot of bullets. Clip guns and things like that.
And I'm looking at Wikipedia, so take it for what it is. That Switzerland does allow the acquisition of semi-automatic and with a permit of fully automatic weapons. So, good on the Swiss. Let's bring them here and teach us how to be better about this, because we have 400 million privately owned guns in our country. And I'm looking at Wikipedia, so take it for what it is. That Switzerland does allow that's more than enough for every American, and with a permit of fully automatic. We seem to have a big gun violence problem. So we know for sure that more guns doesn't make us safer. Be better about this. So what are the Swiss doing better than we are? privately
we
held
are.
guns in our country.
It seems to be training
and a culture of respect, which
you
I think
know,
is very different.
that's
than
more
what we
than
have going
more than
on
enough
here.
for every American.
and they regulate.
And we seem
They
to have a
regulate
big gun
things
violence
differently,
problem.
too.
So we know for sure that
Well,
more
that
guns
and so
doesn't
much
make
more.
us safer.
Yes.
So what are the
Thank
Swiss
you.
doing better that we are?
Than we are. And
Sure.
it seems
Who
to be
else has
training
questions? And a culture of
I have a
respect, which I think is very different than what we have
In the
going on
target
here.
practice
And
and
they
the
regulate.
gun owners
They
that
regulate
want
things differently,
these
too.
high-powered
Well,
rifles,
that and so much more.
what,
Yes. Thank you.
is there a use for an
Sure. Who else has
AR-15 or an
questions?
assault-style weapon?
I have a
in
question.
Sporting,
In the target practice and the gun owners that want
these
Yeah,
high-powered
there
rifles?
absolutely is.
What-
There absolutely is. But I
Is
also
there a
think that
use for
we
an
are willing as a country right
AR-15
now
or an
to sell those
assault-style
weapons to anyone
weapon
who walks in
sporting
with a Visa
in
card and
target
the
practice
barest
and target
forms of ID. And I
competitions?
think if
there
those
absolutely
weapons
is.
were only available to
There
people with
absolutely is. But I
with an
also
interest in
think
target shooting or hobbying,
we are willing as a country
we wouldn't
right now
have
to
the
sell
mass
those
shooting
weapons
crisis
to
we have
anyone
now.
who
And
walks
so
in.
I do think there's
with a
an
Visa card
interest for
and
people
the
to
barest
have forms of
those
ID.
weapons,
And I
but
think if
unfortunately,
those weapons were only available
those are the
to
same
people with
style weapons that are
with
most
an interest
often
in
used
target
mass
shooting or
shootings. And
hobbying,
we have to really think about
we wouldn't
regulation
have the
in
mass
two
shooting
categories,
crisis
right?
we have now. And
The
so
kinds of
I do
weapons
think
we
there's
sell
there's
and
an
make readily
interest for
available for
people
public
to
use,
have
and to
those
whom
weapons,
we sell those
but
weapons.
Unfortunately, because
Those are
we
the
hear all
same
the time,
style weapons that are
not
most often
the
used in
gun,
mass
it's the
shootings.
person,
and we have to
and
really
I
think
argue
about
that it's really
regulation
both.
in two categories.
It's giving
right? The kinds of
irresponsible
weapons
people
we
access
sell
to guns
and make
that cause
readily
gun
available
violence,
for
both the
public
kind
use,
of
Right.
gun
and to whom
and
we
the
sell
kind
those
of person.
weapons.
And so
Yes.
we need to do a better
because
job of
we hear all
regulating
the
both
time
categories
it's
of
not
that. The
it's
gun,
not
it's
one,
the,
it's
the
not the other.
person,
This is a
and I
complex
argue that it's
problem
really both.
with really
It's
complex
giving
solutions.
irresponsible people,
which is why we need to
access
pass
guns
6
that cause gun
policies
violence,
and more
both the
beyond
kind
that.
of gun
And
not
not
kind
there
of
is no,
person.
to
And
put
so
it in terminology
we need to
that's
do a better
appropriate
job
for
of
the
regulating
conversation. There
both
is not a
categories
silver
of
bullet
that.
for this.
It's not
This
one,
con-
it's
this
not
com-
the other.
this complex
problem
has gotten so
with
out of
really
hand
complex
that
solutions,
it's going to require intense,
which is why we need to
complex
pass 6 policies
Yes.
and more beyond
You're
that.
right.
Yeah,
And
Tracy,
not, there is
Yeah.
no, to
Wait,
put it in
my name's
terminology
Bill
that's
Nace.
appropriate for the conversation, there is not a
is
silver
there a
bullet for this.
state or
This
is there,
this complex
to
problem
get back
has
to the
gotten
United
so
States,
out of hand
is
that
there
it's
a
going to require intensely
state
complex solutions.
or
Yes. You're
is
right.
Biden's plan,
Yeah.
where could we
Wait,
look
my
for
name's
the
Bill
gold
Nace.
standard for the
Is there a
United States
state or is
at this
there
point in history?
what
To get back to
That's
the
a
United
great
States,
what should
is
we
there
be
a
shooting for?
a state
Today?
or
So
is
that's a great
Biden's
question.
plan-
I did
where
a
could we
presentation
look
in
for the
person
gold
earlier.
standard for the
And I
United
asked the
States
folks there if
this
if
point in
anybody there
history?
knew what the
What-
safest state
what-
is.
what could-
Does
what
anyone
should
here
we
know
be
what the
shooting
safest
for
state might be?
today?
Hawaii?
So that's
You
a
got
great
it.
question.
Why is
I-
that?
I did a presentation in person earlier.
No,
And I asked the folks
gun
there
trafficking.
if anybody there knew what the safest state
Just
is.
none.
Does anyone here know what the
Hawaii has done a
safest
good
state might
job
be? Passing
Hawaii?
really
got it.
good laws.
Why is that?
But they also have absolutely no interstate trafficking because you can't
No
get there unless you fly on a
interstate gun
plane,
trafficking.
and you can't get through an airport
with a gun.
just none. So
they don't
Hawaii has done a
have
good job
a gun trafficking
passing
problem. They have very low rates
really
of gun
good
violence. Maybe it's
laws,
also because it's so
but they
incredibly
also
beautiful.
have absolutely
What does
no
anybody have to be
interstate
upset over? I
trafficking
don't
'cause
know.
You can't
but,
get there unless you
but
fly
I think
on a plane,
that,
and you
by
can't get
and
through an
large,
airport.
They have no incidents
gun.
of gun trafficking.
So
let's
they
look
don't
at
have
the other states, right?
and
gun
what we
trafficking
learn
problem.
is
They have very low rates of
New
gun
Jersey,
violence. Maybe it's also because it's so
Connecticut,
incredibly beautiful.
New York,
What does anybody have to be upset over? I don't know, but
are
But
incredibly
I think
safe.
that when you talk
by
about
and large,
gun
they
violence,
have no incidents.
you still
of gun
hear about
trafficking.
gun violence. It's
So
still
let's
happens,
look
it's still
at the other
tragic.
states, right? And
But
what
per
we learn
capita,
is their rates of gun violence are
New
very, very
Jersey,
low.
Connecticut,
Comparatively,
New York,
in Delaware,
California,
all of these
and this
states
is a
are
statistic that
incredibly
will shock
safe
you, and I
when
want
you
to get it
talk
right,
about
so
gun
I'm pulling
violence.
it up so I can read.
You still hear
it and
about gun
share
violence. It still happens.
Let
It's
me
still
find
tragic.
it here.
But per capita,
the
their
rate
rates
of
of gun violence are
has
very, very
increased
low.
in Delaware.
Comparatively, in
2011
Delaware,
to 2020.
and this is a statistic
75%.
that will shock you, and I want to get it right.
compared
so
to a
I'm pulling it up so I
33%
can
increase
read it
nationally.
and share it.
Now Delaware
Let
has
me find
lower
it populations. So a 75% increase has increased. Fortunately, is not from 2011 increase in the number to 2020 75, but it is incredibly high percentage compared
And
to
that's really
indicative of
nationally.
sort of gun violence. Now, Delaware has lower population. We also have high rates of gun suicide.
75%
increase, 18%.
Fortunately,
and
is not
the homicide
a
increase was
huge increase in the number of
153%
people.
during that same.
But it is
time
incredibly
category.
high percentage.
And
that's
compared
really
to a
indicative
national
of
increase of
sort of gun
12%
violence
for
for
gun suicide. And 70%
We also have high rates of gun
nationwide,
suicide.
respectively.
Increased
So
18%.
the aggregate is bad news
homicide-
for
the
Delaware.
homicide
The
increase was
individual is bad news for Delaware. We're going
153%.
up in every category
during that same
time
category.
We should be
Looking at
compared
opportunities
to a
head the other
national
way. And
increase of
frankly, our
12%
leaders should be
for gun
falling over
gun
themselves
suicide
to come
and
up with
70%
solutions to this
increase
crisis. And
nationwide,
instead, we are
respectively.
fighting
So
for every vote.
the aggregate
Which means
is bad
we
news
haven't
for
done a good
Delaware.
enough
The
job on the
individual is
community
bad news for
education
Delaware.
side
We're going up
to
in every
really
category.
engage folks.
We should be looking at opportunities to head the other way. And
both
frankly,
sides of
our
the
leaders should
aisle,
be falling over
gun owners,
themselves
non-gun
to come up
owners,
with solutions
concealed
to
carry
this
permit
crisis.
holders,
And instead, we are
veterans, et
fighting for
cetera.
every vote.
There are so many
which means we
different,
haven't done a good enough job on the community education
perspectives
side
on
to
gun
really
violence
engage
and
folks.
gun violence solutions. And we need to do
you
a better
know,
job of engaging folks. because
Everyone, both sides
people
of
should
the
be
aisle,
falling over themselves.
gun
to solve
owners,
this.
non-gun owners, concealed
So
carry
you-
permit
so if
holders,
you were to lay
veterans,
out a
et cetera.
plan
There are so
that-
many
that
different
was the gold
perspectives
standard,
on
you
gun
would pick
violence and
New
gun violence
Jersey,
solutions.
I would.
And we need to do a
or
better job of
California?
engaging folks.
I would pick
because
New Jersey, and the
people
reason
should
I
be
would pick New
falling over
Jersey is
themselves
because
to
I think
solve
we
this
have a lot more in common with New Jersey
so
than we
if you were
do
to lay out a
with
plan
California. So if
that
Delaware
was
is going
the-
to follow a model, let
was
it be
the
New
gold
Jersey,
standard,
right? We
you would
still have
pick
proximity
New Jersey
to
or
major
New York
urban
or
centers.
California, right?
I would pick New Jersey, and the
We are
reason I
still
would pick New
close to
Jersey
Philly,
is because
New
I think
York,
we have a lot more in common with New Jersey,
Boston
than we
Baltimore,
do
Washington,
with
D.C.
California. So if New
if
Jersey
Delaware
has
is going to
far lower
follow a
rates of
model,
gun
let it be
violence
New
than
Jersey,
we do, right?
and
We
what the
still have
experts tell
proximity
us,
to major,
and this is specifically
urban
talking about
centers.
community violence,
Right.
although
right?
all
We are
violence
still close to Philly,
is
New York,
worthy
Boston,
of our work.
Baltimore,
Baltimore,
Washington,
Washington,
D.C.
D.C.
We
But
don't
New
have in
Jersey has
Delaware
far
high
lower
rates of
rates
gun
suicide
violence
than
than
we
are
do.
very
And
fortunate that
what
we
the
have not
experts
had a
tell
mass
us,
shooting.
and
like
this is
we've seen in
specifically talking
Uvalde or
about community
Buffalo,
violence,
especially
although
considering
all
we have fairly
violence
lax gun
is
laws. I
worthy
think a lot of
of
that
our
speaks
work
to
and
Delaware's
prevention. But
specific culture. And
we
the
don't have in
specific
Delaware
culture
high
of
rates
Newcastle
of gun
County.
suicide. We are very fortunate
because that's
that we
where
have
over
not
half
had
of
a
our
mass
population
shooting,
lives in the state.
like we've
And,
seen in Uvalde
but
or Buffalo.
What New Jersey has
especially
that we don't
considering
have,
we have fairly lax
New
gun
Jersey
laws.
has a few things we don't have.
One of
I
the
think a
things
lot of
that
New
Jersey
Jersey
has
has
is
is
incredibly high
Delaware's specific
taxes for
culture,
homeowners,
and the specific
which means
culture
that they
of
have a lot
Newcastle
more
County.
money to put into
Um,
community solutions,
because that's where over half
like
of our
funding
population
community
lives in the
intervention
state.
programs,
And,
group violence
but
intervention.
what New
community
Jersey
violence
has that we
intervention
don't
programs,
have,
New Jersey has a few
hospital-based
things we don't
violence
have.
intervention programs.
One of the things
we
that
have
New
those
Jersey
programs
has is
here,
incredibly high,
but they need to
taxes
grow
for
and they need
homeowners,
more funding.
which
That's
means that
one.
they have a lot more money to put.
The second
into
thing they have
community
is more money
solutions,
and more funding
like
going
funding
into public
community
education
intervention
and public
programs,
awareness
group violence
campaigns.
intervention.
We're getting
community
started
violence
on that
intervention
here, but we're a
programs,
few years behind.
hospital-based
we have not
violence
had
intervention
a
programs.
full-time
We
person
have those
focusing
programs
on
here,
that, but they need
until
to
this
grow,
year.
and they need
I
more
started
funding.
my.
That's one.
I've been full time since
The
January.
second thing they have is more money
So
and more
in our
funding
first
going
6
into
months,
public
in my first
education
6
and
months
public
in this
awareness
role as a
campaigns.
full-time person,
We're
we've done
getting
a lot, but
started
it's
on
also
that
been 2
here, but
years
we're
of
a few
coming off
years
of COVID.
behind. We
With
haven't had
more
a
in-person
full-time
events
person
getting
focusing
scheduled,
on
but not
that.
enough.
Until this
So
year,
we're
I
working on
started
community education.
I've
and
been
finally,
full-time since January.
what New Jersey
So
has
in
that we
our
desperately
first 6
need
months,
is
in
a
my
permit
first
to
6
purchase
months in this
policy.
role
And that
as
was
a
what Lynn was
full-time
talking
person,
about
we've done a
earlier
lot,
with
but it's also been
SB3.
2 years of coming off of COVID.
And
I
with
take full
more
responsibility
in-person
for
events
it not
getting
passing
scheduled,
this
but
year.
not
We
enough.
have not done enough.
So we're working on community
As a
education.
coalition,
And finally,
our partners have not done enough.
what New
to
Jersey has that we
engage
desperately
elected
need
officials
is a
and
permit
make
to
sure
purchase
they are
policy.
educated
And that was
on
what
why
Lynn was
we
talking
need
about
this
earlier
policy.
with SB3.
We did we did it a little
And
differently.
I
in the
take full
Senate.
responsibility
Instead
for
of
it not
educating
passing
people,
this
we just
year.
voted
We
in
have
people
not
who
done
already
enough.
understood it.
As a
We
coalition,
flipped 2
our
critical
partners have
Senate
not
seats
done enough
over
to
the past
engage
2 years, and
elected
before that a
officials
third, and make sure
sorry,
they
the
are
past 2
educated
cycles,
on why
we
we
flipped
need
3
this
critical
policy.
Senate seats. states that have given us
we did it a little differently in the
opportunities that
Senate.
used to be an
Instead of educating people, we just voted in people who
or maybe
already
even a
understood
7-vote guarantee. Now we have,
We
I think,
flipped
2
9
critical
or
Senate
11.
seats over the past
So we
2 years,
are
and
really
before that, a
solid
third
on the
Senate
I'm
side.
sorry, the past
And
two
we can
cycles,
count
we
on the
flipped 3
senators
critical Senate
that we have
seats
supported
that
in
have given
elections to
us
support our policies.
opportunities that
We need
used
better
to be
discipline over in the
an
House.
8-vote
And
guarantee,
the House
or
is
maybe
not
even
even
a
a 7-vote guarantee. Now we have, but
I think
a
9
permit
or
to purchase
11.
would basically work
So
like
we
this.
are really solid on the Senate
Right now, now today, and we can count on the senators $500 that we have supported in elections to support our policies. I want to invest it in. We need better discipline over in the House. And I walk into Cabela's, the House is a nuttier nut to crack, and we're working on it. But 150 a permit to purchase would basically work like dealers in the state. 150 right now today for 3 counties. I have $500 and I decide to buy, and I decide I want to. And I go to the city of Wilmington or the city of Dover, and I sell that handgun to a person. And I walk into Cabela's, and I make a $50, they're 10% profit. Now I have 550 something federally licensed firearm dealers in the state. I go back to a different gun store same day, maybe the same gun store. And I decide to buy a handgun. And I do it again. And I go to the city of Wilmington or the city of Dover and I sell that handgun to a person. I can make maybe a couple $1,000. And I make a half hour, maybe 20 minutes to get now I have $550 in my pocket. Because our background checks I go back to a different gun criminal background check, maybe the same gun store. They don't require fingerprint. And I buy another one. And I do it again. Go from store to store because we have no registry. If I spend the day doing so there's nothing to flag. I can make maybe a couple $1,000. Traci Murphy has now bought 5 guns, 20 minutes to get a background check. As she's because our background checks are not comprehensive. They're not. So we don't have a registry. They don't have a comprehensive criminal background check system. I can go from and finally we don't have an in-person appearance. So there's nothing to flag. And if someone says to me that Traci Murphy has now bought 5 guns, compare that to New Jersey as she's moving where someone has to get a permit. So we don't have a registry. They have to take a training. Don't have a comprehensive criminal background check system. Check me on that. And finally, we don't have a training policy in our bill in Delaware enforcement. I don't know that New Jersey has a training requirement. I know that when they first compare that to New Jersey policy, and they've done the research on the policy, get a permit. The training requirement was not included. They have to take a training class. That's a little bit contrary to what makes sense. We were trying to put a training policy in our bill in Delaware. Makes them safer. I don't know that New Jersey has a training guns out of the unsafe hands. I know that when they first started the policy and they've done the research on the policy, that is training requirement was into our cities. And if we can, that's a little bit contrary to what makes sense, right? You would think that training people, we will makes them safer, but actually it's just keeping guns out of the unsafe hands. Quick money some other way. So it's right now it's too easy and it's opportunity. People always say that is funneling handguns into our cities. Well, they may. And if we can choke off that supply chain with a permit to purchase, it is up to us to make it harder. And we have not forced those criminals and make their strength with background check some other way. System right now it's a little bit and it's irresistible, but not people always say we need a comprehensive criminal background check system. Well, they may. But why are we making it so easy for them? Why are it is up to us to make it harder, and we have not done that. To walk into any an increased strength in background check. And system will do a little bit toward that goal, but not enough. We need a comprehensive criminal background check. Let's take a look at I had to get strengthened to chaperone. I don't personally think of it as an inconvenience. I do not have to get fingerprinted to walk into certain, any clear certain hurdles, go through a certain path, and buy to have access to a deadly weapon. How many of you have? Right. Let's take a look at here's how to strengthen laws. People say, well, people are always going to think of it as an inconvenience. And I'll to have to pass, even though I shouldn't, because my 16-year-old certain, clear certain hurdles. I broke through a certain path to have access to a deadly weapon. I went over the speed limit. I did it several times coming down to Dover, and I did it coming home. Here's a fun question, right? People say, well, because people are always going to break the law, and I say, I bet all of us, even though I should have done that at some point across the room. I broke the law today. You're amazing, because I don't know how I went over the speed limit. We all I did it several times coming down to Dover, and I did it coming home. But we also know why, because when the opportunity was there. And I think if we do a better job of regulation, have done that at some point. Who we sell guns to, and if you haven't, we will find that we can. I don't know how anybody does. Community violence instances in Wilmington and opportunities when they are presented. Yes, Lynn, I see your hand. But we also know when we should not do that. Maybe get Norm. And I think if we do a better job of regulation and discipline on the side of who we sell guns to and how, we will find that we can reduce community violence instances in Wilmington and in Dover. Cares deeply about this and attends a church where the church maybe get Norm to say a little bit. Also, he is passionate about this issue, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Norm, Representative is in part because he, I know, cares deeply about this and attends a church where the church, and I may have that wrong, but Norm is passionate about this issue. I bet you're talking about Vicky Gordy Stith, aren't you? Is in part because she had a child who was killed by a gun, and I may have that wrong, but Norm, I'll let you
gun violence.
Take gun violence.
I bet you're talking about Vicky Gordy Stith, aren't you?
She is really passionate about that.
She's incredible. And in fact, she was testifying in Dover yesterday, and I got there late because I was lucky enough to attend my children's 8th grade graduation. She's with Moms Demand Action, which we know the families in Uvalde were deprived of that
really
baggage.
Passionate
And it is very much on my mind this week. And in fact, she was testifying in Dover yesterday, and I got there not afforded to so many families. But yeah, Vicky's because I was lucky enough to attend my children's 8th grade graduation, which we know the families in Uvalde were deprived of that survivor who lost her son, but also because she's a veteran. My mind this week, and she has trained that young children. Or young afforded to so many families, but yeah, Vicky's members and young officers. She's such a great appropriate gun use, not only because her lived experience speak to that survivor who lost her son, but also because she's a veteran.
She and her husband,
and she has trained
graduates of a Naval
young
Academy,
children,
and they were in the service before they went to
service members and young officers.
Become ministers, and they're both Reverend
appropriate
doctors,
gun use, and she really can speak to that. She's a wonderful advocate.
That's what she and her husband about are graduates of a Naval Academy. As far as they were in the service before they went to the house, I think Duke Seminary. I communicated with him, but become ministers, and they're both Reverend doctors. It's going to take a lot more.
Yeah, she's a wonderful advocate.
Longer pressure. That's what she's really passionate about. And I think if I'm right, as living close to the Speaker of the House, I communicated with him. In effect, Switzerland has, their people have essentially an army of hundreds of thousands of people. Longer pressure on him. They've all been trained how to use those weapons. I think part of their training. Right. Something to defend their country. I think in effect, Switzerland has. Their people have essentially an army of hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah.
That's right.
And they've all been trained how to use those weapons as part of their training. If people can defend the country, defend their country.
Yeah, I think they have to be able to produce that gun and fall out at a moment's notice. As part of the military. I think that's part of the requirement of owning that weapon. That's right. Yep.
That's what I heard one time. Citizenship approaching $500,000 people.
It's also part of their requirement that the gun.
Yeah, I think they have to be able to produce that gun and fall out at a moment's notice, as they actually say. I think that's part of the requirement.
I think it's so interesting to learn about how these complex problems are solved.
It's also part of their requirement that the gun
because we have so much to learn from the
ammunition.
examples that others set, and I have to say I'm very proud of Delaware rising to the occasion right now and taking big, bold initiatives. Interesting to learn about how both on regulating who is eligible to buy a gun and specifically focusing on raising the minimum because age we have purchase. So much to learn. We currently have raised the minimum age for purchase to 21 for handguns. I have to say I'm very proud of Delaware rising to the occasion right now and taking big, bold initiatives, raising the minimum age, both on regulating who is eligible to buy a gun and teenagers. Specifically focusing on raising the changing adolescent brain. We currently have raised the minimum age for purchase to 21 for handguns and risky behavior. But for assault style weapons, it feels really necessary to raising the minimum age. Even just a little bit about brain really science honored by teenagers. You recognize that kind of got involved in adolescent brain policy yesterday in House Committee that don't normally participate in these conversations and risky behavior and really rewarding. It feels to see really the CEO of Children and Families First was there to provide that protection. More Christiana Care, really honored by very often don't kind of got involved in advocating for that. They got involved policy yesterday in House Committee. Yeah, Lynn. That don't normally participate in these conversations.
Our Peace and Justice Work Group has
really rewarding to see
a lot
the CEO of
lately
Children and Families First was there
to engage
more
people in the
conversations
of issues
very often
to us. Meaning we feel like sometimes we're talking to the choir when we all gather and talk about these issues and how do we talk to people that have different views as try to have a lot about civil discourse around ways to engage. And so I'll just more people in the conversation. Yesterday in Dover, I was also just meeting when we feel like so many when we all gather and talk about these issues and how do we talk to people that I ended up striking up a conversation, try to have some civil discourse around policy NRA, and so I'll just share quickly together. Yesterday in Dover, I was also meeting halfway between so many and we're going to get together on Monday to have a civil conversation. But I ended up striking up a conversation with some someone
see how
who
that
was there,
conversation
I guess,
goes
with the NRA,
and she is
we're
open
having
to
dinner
expanding
together,
that further, inviting some
we're
of
meeting
her
halfway
friends. I
between.
can invite
She's
some
from
of my
Smyrna, and
friends.
we're going to
and
get
trying
together on
to
Monday
to have a
some more of a
civil
conversation around that.
about our differing
We'll
views.
see.
Depending on how it goes, I told her,
conversation goes.
she
that
is
I may
open
want to in a
to
future
expanding
conversation
that
bring
further,
someone
inviting
from
some
either
of
your
her friends.
organization
I can
and
invite
or
some of
Moms
my
Demand
friends
Action
and
who have
trying
more
to
facts and knowledge
have
on the subject.
some more of a
Because I just bring
conversation around that.
my
So
own opinions.
we'll see.
and values, but
depending
not
on how it
necessarily
goes.
all
I told her
the
you know,
knowledge that you guys have.
but
It'll be
may want
interesting to see
in a
where
future
conversations like
conversation
that bring
go.
someone
Well,
from
and I
either
think
your
that's really
organization and
wonderful,
or Moms
and
Demand
the
Action
spirit
who
of
have
that
more
is so
facts and knowledge on the
beautiful.
subject, because I just
You
bring
know, as an
my own
advocate,
opinions
I sort of keep
and
my eyes
values,
really
but not
focused, right? I'm running
necessarily
an
all
advocacy
the
group for this
knowledge that you
specific
guys
issue,
have.
but we have a
But
dotted
it'll be
line
interesting to
support
see where
group
conversations like
with
that
so
go.
many other
And I
issues
think
that
that's
plenty
really
of those
wonderful,
folks come on
and
board
the
with.
spirit
And I
of that is
and
so
sometimes we have to
beautiful.
recognize, you know, a vote for
You know, as an
advocate is a vote for gun violence prevention because we are lifting the bottom line and helping families solve complex dotted line support which removes with so many other indicators plenty of those folks come on board with. And I think domestic abuse, and sometimes we have to recognize, you know, a vote for poverty and all these other things that are really related. So I think because we are lifting the bottom line and helping families solve complex problems. But what I find which removes when tragedies like the ones indicators and last week happen, more people are willing to come to the table. And for every day we don't do a big action, that are really related, we will just invite more people who've experienced tragedy. It's a complex issue. But
an
what I
organization
find
that's really
is
great for
when
advocacy,
tragedies like
for
the ones
learning
in
skills
Uvalde
and
last week
advocacy is
happen,
something called
more people are willing to come to the table. And for every day
Look
we
it up
don't
on the
do a big
internet,
action,
and you can
we will just
join
invite
in
more
without
people
having
who've
to pay
experienced
anything.
tragedy
I pay
personally.
$12 a year, and I get
An
full
organization
services
that's
from
really
Braver
great
Angels.
for advocacy,
And
for
it
learning
is
skills
an
and
excellent
advocacy is something
organization
called Braver
because
Angels.
it is that
.org.
non-conversation. Look it up on the internet, and you can join
they
in
train you
without
to
having to
engage
pay
in.
anything. I pay $12
I will
a
look
year,
it up.
and I
Thank
get
you for
full
sharing that
services
with
from
me.
Braver
I
Angels.
think I so
And
often learn more
it
from
is an excellent
these kinds of
organization
conversations
because
than I share.
it is
So
that
I appreciate that. Thank you.
non-conversation,
Say the name of the
confrontational
organization
conversations
again.
that they train you to engage in.
I
.org.
will look it up. Thank you for sharing that with me.
And
Braver.
I think
Moms-
I so often learn
Let me
more
just
from
spell it for you because I
these
can
kinds
see
of
that she's not
conversations than I
quite getting
share.
it
So I
because
appreciate that.
some of the
Thank you.
letters get lost
Say the
over
name
the
of the
microphone.
organization
It's
again.
it's a
Braver
B as in boy, R
as
as
in
in
Robert.
Robert, A as in
And so
Alpha.
promise.
Let me just spell it for
There
you.
you
because
go.
I can
There,
see that
Tracy
she's
just
not
put it
quite
right up
getting
there.
it because
Oh, Braver
some of the
Angels.
letters get
Got it.
lost
Yes.
over the
Mhm.
microphone.
All right.
It's
Well, thank you,
it's a
everyone. We
B
did
as in
promise to
boy,
get everyone out a few
R
minutes
as
before
in
8, so we
Robert,
can all go
A is in
watch
Alpha.
the January 6th hearing if we'd like. I
There you
thank you
go.
all for
There, Tracy
participating.
just put it right up there.
Since
Oh,
Sue
Braver
was the
Angels.
one who
Got it.
started the
Mhm.
recording, I was
All
not
right.
able
Well,
to shut it
thank you,
off at the end of the
everyone. We did
presentation.
promise to get
All this
everyone
has
out a
been
few minutes
recorded,
before
but
8,
Sue
so
assures
we
me
can
she
all
can cut
go,
off our conversation
watch the
if we don't
January
want
6th
it to
hearing
be
if
part
we'd
of the
like.
recording.
I
Yeah,
thank
So
all
I'll
for
ask
participating
for
our friends and colleagues
Sue
who
was
want to
the
watch
one
this
who
after the
started
fact.
the recording.
Are we comfortable?
I was not able to
including
shut
our
it off at
discussion
the end of
as
the
part of the
presentation,
recording,
or
or
would
would
you
you
like
like
Sue
been
to shut it
recorded?
off?
But Sue assures me she can
I
cut
have no
off our
problem with it.
conversation if
Okay.
we
have
don't
any
want it to
problem
be
with it.
part of the recording.
Yeah, I feel like
So
nothing
I'll
got
ask
too personal
folks
or
who are,
crazy.
our friends and colleagues
I
who
think
want to
it would
watch
be
this
fine
after the
if we
fact.
include the whole
Are
thing.
we
So
comfortable
I will tell her she
including
can do
our
that.
discussion as part of
Thank
the
you,
recording,
Tracy,
or would
for
you
joining
like
us
Sue
this
to shut it
evening.
off?
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, I have
Thank
no
you
problem.
so much.
Really
Okay.
honored,
any
and I
problem
will
with it.
put my email here.
Yeah,
and
I
Lynn
feel like
has it
nothing
too,
got
if
too
you've got
personal or
follow-up questions
crazy.
or want to
I
engage
think it
more
would be
deeply
fine
on
if
any of
we
these
include the whole
specific
thing.
topics,
So
or just sort
I
of
will tell her she
join
can do
us
that.
as we
Thank
continue
you,
our
Tracy,
advocacy
for
this
joining us
month.
this
We'd be
evening.
grateful.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Really honored, and I will put my email here, and Lynn has it too, if you've got follow-up questions or want to
Tracy.
engage more
and thank you
deeply
again
on
for
any of
your
these
patience
specific
with my
topics, or just
technology
sort of
and my timing
join
today.
us as we continue our
I think it
advocacy
was
this month. We'd be
Very
grateful.
impressive what you did.
I've been learning on the fly this year, so thank you again. Let's go see what happens now. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you,
Good night,
Tracy.
everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you again
Thank
for
you.
your
Good day
patience
to
with my
everybody.
technology
Good night.
am.